Alison Thewliss.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In coming to this general debate upon the economy, I reflected on a couple of things. First of all, that my Papa Thewliss always told me before I died that I should have gone and done a night course in economics, and he was quite probably right, not knowing at the time that I would end up here. And I was also reflecting on my good friend Miriam Brett, a former employee of the SNP group at Westminster, who took away some of the concerns I had about my right as a woman who didn't know so much about these things to speak about the economy. Because she said, actually, those guys that stand up and talk about figures all the time, usually they have no idea what they're talking about anyway. They just sound a bit impressive because they've got the figures in front of them. So in taking the things that she used to encourage me with, as well as some of the work that the Women's Budget Group have produced over the years about the gender impact of the budget, I thought a bit about who the economy is for and what the economy is for. And is it about figures or is it actually about people? And fundamentally, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's about people. And I stuck this question out last night to people on Twitter, half fearing what might come back, and got some excellent contributions, all from women, as it happens, Madam Deputy Speaker, about their thoughts on the economy and how they fit within it. And Lorraine Gillis said that the economy is about making decisions in a people-before-process way that enables people to achieve economic health, and it's about spending to save. And that chimes very clearly with the things that I have heard from experts such as Sir Harry Burns, who talks about the importance of people having a sense of control over their lives. And what I have seen in my 3 years now in this place and my 8 years previously in Glasgow City Council is a decline in the amount of control that people feel as though they have over their own lives. They are tiny cogs in a huge machine that doesn't recognise them, doesn't recognise what they have to contribute, doesn't recognise the skills that they have and the things that they could contribute, but instead it has become a system that punishes them every day. It punishes them in a range of different ways. Now, whether that be through the welfare system, through the immigration system, or just through the very precarious nature of employment in these islands now, they feel as though they don't have any say in this economy, and this economy does not work in any way for them. And we see this reflected in the figures of wages stagnating, of costs increasing, of the difficulties that young people find now when compared to the generations that came before me. Young people now cannot afford to buy a house, find it more difficult even to rent a house in lots of places in the UK, that they have insecure employment, they have insecure prospects. Sometimes they're very well qualified now, far more better qualified than they have ever been, but they can't get a say in the economy round about them. And ministers before and other members have talked about the public finances, but these public finances are not, as far as I can see, to public benefit. A lot of the time they're for private benefit, for companies and organisations rather than the people in the economy itself. Another woman, Fiona Brown, said, "I would like the economy to serve me, mine and the common weal. Currently we seem to be enslaved to it, and the elites who remain the beneficiaries. Fairness is needed." And fairness runs through a lot of the things that the SNP have said on the economy, my colleagues before me in this place. And the economy has seen banks bailed out while people have lost their jobs. We have seen banks closing their branches right across the country, but the corporate executives running away with lots and lots of money, their pockets stuffed full of the people's cash. And that's something that we need to reflect upon when we see people so disenfranchised from the economy. We also see continual loopholes, and I see this in the complexity of the tax code, having sat through a couple of finance bill committees and seen the very huge complexities that we are building in layer upon layer upon layer within the tax code in this country, which allows people to find other ways to manipulate money, to take money away from where it should be, in the public coffers and being used for public good. And we see things like SLPs and Scottish Limited Partnerships, and my former colleague Roger Mullen has worked incredibly hard on this to bring these issues to light, as well as the journalist David Leask and Richard Smith, the researcher on this, an expert on this issue, about how money has been funnelled away, has been hidden away, and that we have no accountability over that money and who owns it and where it goes and what purposes it is used for at the end of that process. And we've seen how that can be through Soviet oligarchs or through various regimes in the world who want to hide their money. And we need to get to a point where there's a lot more public accountability of that. And we facilitate these loopholes as well within the economy by allowing Companies House that you can register a company for just 12 quid and do none of the anti-money laundering type requirements that you would usually have to do. And this has to stop. And the government has to say, actually, if you want to register a company, that due diligence must be there. The UK government cannot be turning a blind eye to companies that are ripping off people right around the world. And we talked about, some of the women that contacted me as well talked about the role of carers in our society. And Lynn Williams said, the economy doesn't recognise or reward my unpaid care, and those of us at the hard end of cuts do not benefit from growth such as it is in Scotland or the UK. And if we stand here and we talk about figures about growth, and we talk about figures about the economy, if people out there in the street are not feeling that, if they are seeing prices going up and they are struggling every single day to put food on the table, we are failing them, and we are not recognising the difficulties that they are going through. And the injustices continue, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the Resolution Foundation says this coming year, 2018 to 19, is set to be the second biggest single year of welfare cuts since the crisis, at 2.5 billion. 2.5 billion more of cuts to people who have already found themselves losing out as a result of that. And welfare reform is rolling on and is damaging people that come to my surgeries, and even the people that don't come to my surgeries who I want to be able to help and never make it through the door because they're so beaten down by the system. And it's hitting families, and it's hitting disabled people the very most. And figures just out from Glasgow Centre for Population Health say that 24% of the working age population in Glasgow has a disability which impacts on the work that they can do. And we need to think about that, because many of these people will want to work, but they find themselves trapped in a system that punishes them whichever way they go, that makes them feel as though they are being put upon for the very act of claiming something that they are absolutely entitled to get, that they are going through all of this trauma again and again and again, proving to faceless bureaucrats that they have a right to something. And when we look at child poverty, CPAG say that child poverty is up now 3 years running, and 67% of that child poverty is in families where the parents are working. And that should shock us all, because those families are working damn hard every day to put food on the table. And constituents that I see at my surgeries are working incredibly hard to try and put food on the table, but they can't. I have families coming to me asking for me to get school uniforms for their children, to get Christmas presents for their children, because they cannot afford it. In 2018.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. I mean, she's making a very powerful speech about the impact that welfare reform is having on economies. Would she agree with me, though, that the other people that suffer are small retailers and providers? Because those people who are not receiving that welfare support anymore are not spending that in his small shops. And in my own constituency in Stoke-on-Trent, it is estimated that £83 million will be lost from our local economy through welfare changes alone, which means lots of our small businesses will simply struggle to employ people in the future.
Absolutely, and it's well known that people will spend money in those local shops, will support that economy, and it's had a very similar impact on Glasgow as well. And in speaking to the Welfare Rights Department in Glasgow City Council, they say that 636 households in Glasgow where housing costs are relatively low, are affected by the benefit cap, and 94% of those households have children. Now, the government should know that it's taking food out of the mouths of bairns. They should know that, because this is what's happening, and they should be ashamed of it. And this is affecting ethnic minorities as well, and the EHRC report that came out last week as well highlighted that three-quarters of the cuts to welfare benefits are affecting Pakistani families. Now, the government denies that it's done any such thing. It doesn't regard this report as being important, but it really is, because this is about how people can be included in the economy. And if they are having all agency taken away from them, all money taken away from them, that the cuts are disproportionately affecting particular groups, then this government has a real problem on its hands, and it has to acknowledge that. There also has been a significant impact on women. And in Gender, in their excellent reports, have highlighted that 86% of the cuts to welfare benefits have come from women's pockets. And that is a household where women are not getting money, are not being able to put food on the table, as I've already outlined. But it also means that women have less capability in the world as well. For women who are facing domestic violence, it makes it far more difficult for them to leave that situation, and it puts them in danger. And it makes it far, far more difficult for women to achieve all of the things that they could do in life. And it ruins women's potential to, once they have had children and perhaps want to go back into the job market, it makes it far more difficult for them to do that if they do not have the means to get them by as they work their way back in again. And I want to pay particular tribute at this point to the WASPI campaigners across the country who see this firsthand. Now, these are women that have worked their whole lives. They have worked in low-paid jobs. They have often worked in very strenuous jobs, lifting and shifting and moving people and moving goods around, only to see that just as they approached that retirement age, that goal that they had set to get, to see that date move away from them in the cruelest possible way. And I want to mention in particular Rosemary Dixon. And Rosie is a stalwart WellSpay campaigner in Glasgow. And she was raised in the Calton by a single mum. She started working at 15 while she was still at school to get her through her exams. And since then, she'd always paid the big stamp. At 17, she moved into the NHS and she qualified as a clinical perfusionist. She ran heart-lung bypass machines and was in organ retrieval teams. But that job took its toll. It was very strenuous on her and she retired. And she is now 60 and she can't find employment, Madam Deputy Speaker. She has tried all different places to do so. She's even applied for a job with the DWP, which they said she wasn't qualified enough to get. She tried, as advised by the government minister at the time, to get an apprenticeship, to which she was not. She was told she was not qualified, and if she wanted to get training, she would have to pay £2,000 to get the qualification herself. She's really struggling, Madam Deputy Speaker. Rosie has seen her dreams of a happy retirement, of moving on to spend the time that she wanted in retirement in the way that she wanted. She may have to sell her house, and she's found that many women that she knows have found themselves now dependent for the first time in their lives on their husbands. And that doesn't say very much for gender equality in 2018. The women who have worked their whole lives in jobs that paid them less, which made them work hard, now find themselves dependent on husbands at a time when they thought they would actually get some time back and some independence back themselves, which is a real stain on our consciences. And I want to mention as well, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the hugely valuable contribution that people who are not born in the UK make to our economy. And that may be EU nationals, it may be non-EU nationals, but so many of them make an absolutely tremendous effort in our economy and contribute hugely. But they have not seen that effort rewarded by the UK Government. And I could list any number of immigration cases here today, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I see you don't want me to, we don't have the time. But what I see again and again and again is people who have come here, worked, set up a business, employ native Glaswegians in that business, and then find for some very, very small technical reasons, which the Home Office seem to have no flexibility to deal with, they find that they're not allowed to work any longer. They're not allowed to get public funds. They're left absolutely high and dry with a family to feed, a house to pay for, bills to pay, and nothing. And that's really, really cruel, Madam Deputy Speaker. And these folk have so much to contribute to our economy, and we should thank them for their efforts. We should thank them for all that they have done, for choosing to make Glasgow, Scotland, the UK, their home. We owe them a great debt of gratitude. And while there's a minister on the bench, I would like to raise particularly the issue of those who have been caught out under the immigration rules at 322.5 of the rules, who made a very legitimate change to their tax returns, sometimes years ago, now find when they're applying to regularise their status here that they have been told under this discretionary 322.5 that they're a threat to national security. This is absolutely ludicrous, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the Minister on the front bench, I would be very grateful if he could look into this, because we encourage people to make minor changes to their tax return. We don't want people not to make changes to their tax return if they are due. But for this group of people who have come here in highly skilled jobs, worked very hard, never taken a day's benefits or anything like that, they are now finding themselves being at risk of removal from this country under this discretionary rule. And this is a huge threat to our economy if people feel as though they are made so unwelcome as a result of that. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we need to talk about austerity. And we have to look at the long-term impact that this has had on the health and the well-being of our nation and the knock-on effect that that health and well-being has on our economy. And we need to look at women within that. And Women's Aid Northern Ireland said to me, most women's equalities issues are in fact economic, but wrongly get described as fluffy marginal social quibbles. Or that caring work which props up our economy since the day Adam Smith's ma fed and clothed him every day is not counted as a valuable function, a valuable contribution to the UK's economic functionality. And if we want to be a country, as the Prime Minister says, that works for everybody, we need to recognise what everybody brings to this, and we need to make sure that people are rewarded properly for that. Yeah.